Hey, everybody, welcome to the virtual Orenda class for the Northeast Pool and Spa Show for 2021. Yes, it's virtual. Unfortunately, we're not able to eat that great Atlantic City food that is suspiciously cash only almost everywhere you go, but delicious. But hey, you don't have to wear a mask, right? We do miss having to travel all the way to Atlantic City, but that's one of our favorite shows of the year. We do miss seeing you all in all seriousness. I wish we could be there, but you know, times are weird. So we have to embrace the changes, and this is the best we can do for now. So NESPA has invited us to teach one of the many classes. And I know education has always been a focus at the Northeast Pool and Spa Show. So we are honored to be here. And I say really, it's just me in the room. So I'm honored to be here. But we, as a company at Orenda, are really grateful. We've always had such great response and a lot of enthusiasm for what we're teaching. And at the Northeast Pool and Spa Show, we're grateful for you. We're grateful for you being here. And we hope that the material that I've put together today is of value to you. Please comment in videos. Actually, I don't even know if this is going to be published on YouTube. So if there are comments, because I have no idea how NESPA is going to publish this, if there are comments, please leave some comments below. We'll try to answer your questions. If not, you can email me at Eric, that's ERIC, at orendatech.com. And we love hearing feedback. You could also message us on Facebook or just go to the app, contact us directly through the Orenda app. Now, today's topic is directly speaking to your company, your business, and its profitability. Now, we're a chemical company. You might be wondering, hey, why is Orenda talking about things that have nothing to do with chemicals? The reason why is because we're in this industry too. And nobody calls Orenda to just show a good pool. They call us when there's problems. And so around the country, when we go and we see swimming pools, they're the problem swimming pools. Now, a lot of you have heard me teach before. I know I've met so many of you through like the Metro New Jersey chapter. I've been there in person several times. I've met a bunch of you companies in your own offices before. And a lot of you share the same problems that other people around the country have. And so what we've done is sort of distilled down the most common issues that we see in the pool business, not just in the Northeast, but all over the country. And we realized that most of these problems are preventative, and a lot of them are free to change. And what it comes down to is habits. We, like most industries, are an industry based on habits. How many times have you heard, oh man, this is how I've been doing it for all these years? I mean, I hear it all the time. Oh, well, we've been doing startups this way for so long, and never had a problem until yesterday. Okay. It's an industry of habits. We know when you add X amount of liquid chlorine, you put X amount of acid, whatever you were trained in. Well, I'm going to challenge some of those today. I'm going to challenge some of those in this class, and there's 6 of them in particular. And here's the good thing. They cost almost nothing to change. They're pretty much free. A couple dollars for 2 of them, and I'll explain what those are. But by and large, these don't cost you anything, but they are costing you a lot of money if you don't make the change. Now, we at Orenda are not in the business of telling anybody how to run their business. So you don't have to listen to this. Even if you just get one nugget out of it and you implement that, that's great. We hope you do. We don't really have a dog in that fight. What we're trying to do is we're just trying to point things out that you might not be aware of. And maybe you're a business owner, maybe you're just a newcomer to the industry, or maybe you're a veteran. You could be a sole proprietor, you could be a service tech with a big company. It doesn't matter to us. If you treat swimming pools, this message is for you. And we hope that it helps you improve yourself in what you do in this industry, because it's going to allow you to deliver better results to your customers. And our objective with this class today is to help you become aware of these 6 bad habits so that you get rid of them and you become more profitable. I'm Eric Knight with Orenda. Let's get started with the 6 bad habits. Oh, by the way, this is a recording, so check this out. We got video effects. Nathan, star swipe me. Number 6, not measuring chemicals. Now, how many times have you seen, I guess I shouldn't say seen, how many times you just come to a pool and you didn't even have a measuring cup? You just know it's, a little bit of this. You're eyeballing it, right? People do it with liquid chlorine. And to be honest, with liquid chlorine, it's not such a huge deal because it's going to get used up. But with acid, it's a huge deal. Or how about just estimating how much bicarb you need without actually measuring it? Well, if you do that, you're kind of costing yourself extra money in two respects. Number one, you could be using more chemical than you need, and that's actual dollars. And sometimes that's, that's a small amount of money, but it could add up over time. But what it really boils down to is you're throwing your chemistry off. And now you've got consequences that could actually compound into a much bigger problem. So say, for example, you think you need half a gallon of acid to make a certain treatment. Well, what happens if you didn't dose that right? What if it was actually more like half of that? Well, now you're using twice the amount of acid. Sure, a few bucks, but you visit that pool every week. Over the course of a season, and granted, in the Northeast, I realize it's 4 or 5 month season, but over the course of the season, that's actual dollars that add up, especially if you have a lot of pools that you service. Now, we see this all over the country. We ask this very question. Say you have a 20,000 gallon pool. All right. You see it in your mind. How much acid does it take to take that 20,000 gallon pool from an 8.0 pH? So you get there, you test the pH, it's 8.0, and you want to lower that 8.0 to 7.5. 20,000 gallon pool, lower the pH from 8.0 to 7.5. How much acid does that take? Take a second to think about that. If you said roughly about half a gallon, that's what most of the country says, but you're wrong. It's actually, dependent on the alkalinity, closer to a quart. That's half a gallon. And so most people think, based on habits, that, I need a half a gallon of acid for this pH correction just to get down to 7.5. Well, two things on that, which we'll discuss a little bit later in this list. Why do you have to get down to 7.5 or 7.4 or 7.3? Be thinking about why you're making that pH correction, but then use the Orenda app and it'll do the calculation for you. And if you do at 90 alkalinity, you're going to realize you're nowhere close to half a gallon. Now, if you had a much higher alkalinity, it's going to be more that it requires. So we have this convenient chart here that will show you exactly what we're talking about. Check this out. So if you have 60 alkalinity, then what you're going to see is it takes only 21.01 ounces. But, an average of 80 or 90, that's 28.02 for 80 alkalinity, and 90 alkalinity is 31.52. A quart is 32 ounces. So it's about a quart. And you see this, like the average alkalinities that we have in these pools, it's actually a smaller amount of acid than most people think. Now, if you did say, hey, I think it's a quart, good for you, but you're an anomaly, that you're exceptionally good at real math, or you've been using the app and you knew calculations better than we did. I'm not going to pretend that we just knew the math through our heads. We've learned through our own app too. So dosing is a big part of this, not just because it costs you extra money, more like, twice the amount of acid in a season. Do the math on that. But it's actually taking out twice as much alkalinity as you were supposed to. So now you have to actually buy bicarb to replenish that alkalinity. So this actually starts to compound, as you can see, and it actually costs a lot more money than just the dollars that purchase the acid. So not measuring chemicals can be a really bad habit that's easily fixed. Have two measuring cups, a dry scoop for only dry chemicals and a liquid plastic measuring cup. Typically, we like them about the size of a quart with graduated lines on it so that you can do, your liquid chlorine, you could do acid, you can do any liquid, right? You could do enzymes, you could do whatever else you want, phosphate remover. Just keep rinsing it out and just get a pretty durable plastic measuring cup. That is one that actually costs you some money, but how much does a measuring cup cost? A few bucks? Probably a worthwhile investment. So that's the sixth of our, I guess that's the number 6 of 6. So now we're going to go to number 5, the number 5 bad habit. And that is, oh wait, Nathan, star swipe me again. Number 5, not knowing your pool volume or not measuring your pool volume. We see this problem a lot that homeowners don't always know the volume of their pool. And service guys look at a pool and they're like, oh, it's about X. Well, I know in the Northeast, you have a lot of different types of pools. You have vinyl liner, fiberglass, and you have in-ground gunite pools. You also have above ground pools. In an above ground pool, first of all, I'm guessing most of you don't service above ground pools because that's usually DIY homeowners. But it's a pretty firmly understood volume of water because it's the same shape everywhere you go. All right. But an in-ground pool is not always that simple. So do you actually take the time to measure out the dimensions of the pool and estimate that volume as accurately as you can? Or do you just listen to what someone says, or do you just eyeball it? Yeah, I'm just ask yourself that question, right? If you see a lot of pools, I'm not doubting that you have experience, but I've been in a lot of backyards where I'm with a professional who's been doing this for 20 years or more. And they say, yeah, this is a 25,000 gallon pool. Are we looking at the same pool? There's no way there's 25,000 gallons in this. And so I map out the measurements. It's actually 18,000 gallons according to the dimensions that we were able to measure. But there's no way it was 25. Okay, so 18 to 25, that's a difference of, if my math is right, 7,000 gallons. That's not insignificant. It's like 20, 21%, something like that. Don't double check my math. That's in my head. If you're off and you think the pool is bigger than it actually is, you're going to be adding more chemicals. Even if you're using the Orenda app to dose your chemicals accurately, you're going to be spending more because you're dosing for a larger volume of water than is actually in that pool. More importantly than that, you're overdosing the pool, which can lead to rebounding chemistry problems. Again, and we'll explain this later more, but if you're adding too much acid, so instead of just assuming it's half a gallon, let's say you're assuming it's a 20,000 gallon pool. What if it's not? What if it's a 17,000 gallon pool? Or what if it's even bigger and you're not, serving it enough chemicals that it needs? So what happens is if you don't know the volume of your pool, it doesn't matter how good you are at testing water. It doesn't matter how honest you are at that. You're not going to get the right dosing because, the calculator can only be as accurate as the volume that you put in and the inputs that you give it. It's just a calculator. So if you don't know the volume of your pool, you're doing yourself no service. You're absolutely getting in your own way, and your homeowner is not going to be, how do you say it? It's not that they won't be happy, because most times they're not going to know, but they're not going to be served as efficiently as you can do. Okay. You're a pool professional. You can be better than that. And by knowing the volume of the pool, it doesn't take that long to figure out, by the way. By knowing the volume of your pool, you're going to up your game. So here's how you break that habit. Measure the dimensions. And if you're a pool builder, or the pool builder who built that pool, contact them, because they typically have the software that designed the pool. And that software should be pretty accurate as to what that pool is. It's not going to be perfect because the Gunite crew didn't do perfectly straight lines, or maybe they curved in the bottom a little bit more than it was supposed to be, or less. So it's not going to be exact. But if you're within a few hundred gallons, that's pretty dang good. And you want to be as accurate as possible. If you're off by 7,000 gallons or something, it's going to catch up to you at some point. I promise you, it's going to catch up. So know the volume of your pool. Once you do, write it down. And hey, shameless plug, here's a branding opportunity for you and your business. Put it on like a business card or a sticker with your company name, logo, and phone number. Put that little line of pool volume under it. Get those stickers made. Write that volume down and stick it inside the equipment somewhere that it won't get rained on. If you do that, every time a service technician goes there, or the pool eventually goes DIY, I don't know, they're going to know the exact volume of the pool. Now, it's not so much that homeowners exaggerate the volume of their pools. Some do, probably. But realtors definitely do. So if this home is a new owner buys the home, they didn't build the pool, the realtor puts in the MLS listing, oh, there's this 30,000 gallon backyard pool. Trust me, I've seen it happen. I live in Charlotte. I went to a pool that I was told was 32,000 gallons. It was closer to 20. I mean, just one glance, any one of you could have walked in the backyard and said, that ain't 32,000 gallons. But the realtor put it on there. Yeah, we'll fudge some numbers. Well, come to find out, the pool was built 2 owners previous. So it's probably like the telephone game where they just think, oh, that's pool. Well, it's 20,000. Oh, maybe it's 25,000. Oh, it's 30. Oh, maybe it's 32. It gets out of hand. So be careful. You have to know the volume of your pool. Okay. Let's move on to number 4 out of 6. So, Nathan, star swiping. Never ignore water temperature. This is a really, really bad habit. Okay. This is the other one of those 6 habits that actually costs you some money to correct. And it's a few bucks for a thermometer. Doesn't have to be a fancy one. You can spend as much as you want, but honestly, I use an analog thermometer on a string. It's great. I tie it to my test kit. When I go to a pool, I just plunk that thing in. I do all my other test kit readings, and then I pull the thermometer out, and that's what I put in the Orenda app. The LSI, Langmuir Saturation Index, needs the water temperature to be accurate. And I'm not talking, I guess it's better than nothing, but I'm not talking about those automation systems or those nice systems that Pentair, Hayward, Jandy make that have the thermometers in the system. That's telling you the temperature in the plumbing, assuming that the pool has been circulating. Yeah, it's better than nothing. But I want to know what's in the vessel. What is the temperature, a foot underwater, 18 inches underwater in the pool? Okay, now a lot of times you can just keep it in the skimmer while you're not there. And then when you get there, just remember to throw that thermometer tied to, the skimmer lid or something. Some people tie it to a ladder, throw it in the pool. Get the accurate temperature. It takes you 25 seconds, right? It's so easy to do. I bought my thermometer for like $7 at distribution. It's not hard to get one. Every one of your service people should have a thermometer with them at all times. Every time you go in a backyard, you need a thermometer. Here's why. If you don't take temperature into account, you could be woefully wrong on the LSI. You could be damaging that pool and not even know it. Then you could get things like spiking pH because cement is etching. Well, if that happens, you're not going to be able to maintain a typical water balance, and you're actually going to have a higher pH than you should, even though you etched because your water was too aggressive because the temperature dropped. You could actually start getting scale. Now, it's hard to do in cold water, but it's possible if the pH spikes high enough, because then the LSI kind of rebounds on its own to try to balance itself. Well, if you go there and you're thinking range chemistry, not LSI, you see the super high pH, and what do you add? Acid. Oh, and by the way, let's compound this. What if you don't know the actual volume of the pool? Maybe you add too much, or you're not measuring chemicals and you just eyeball it and you add way too much. All of these things are easy to stop. Know the temperature of the water so that you can make more informed LSI decisions on how you actually treat it. Getting back a step, know the volume of your pool. Write it down so you don't have to remember it, so that you get accurate dosing when you do test the water and put it in the Orenda app. And then measure the chemicals before you add them. As you can see here at 82 degrees, we have perfectly balanced 0.0. And by the way, if you've been using this app, thank you so much. If not, it's just called Orenda. It's a free app. There it is. So you can get that. We recently did an update where if you come down here, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but there's a question mark at the bottom here. If you just tap that, here's a color legend. It tells you what the colors are supposed to be. This is a new feature. Most people probably already know what this is, but this explains what the LSI is actually telling us. So if that number goes purple, it's oversaturated with calcium carbonate. It's going to lead to scale. Green is ideal. Yellow it can be ideal actually if for like a salt pool as part of a strategy, but it's going to rise as the pH rises. And we'll explain that in a minute. But you don't want to go red. Red is bad in any case. It's always going to etch. It's hungry for calcium, and you don't want to be in that situation. So here we are at 82 degrees. Now, these numbers, everything, textbook range chemistry, all that's well and good. What happens when the temperature drops? Now watch this. Now, a lot of you have heard this message before, but here we are again. Now at 45 degrees, 46. Yeah, so at 49 degrees, 48 degrees, you're already starting to etch. Now, I happen to know in the Northeast, your pools are going to freeze at some point during the wintertime. Unless you keep them running with a heater, they're going to get all the way down to 32 degrees at some point. That's an advantage that you have over other parts of the country that don't know how cold it's going to be. For instance, Dallas, Texas, they don't know if their pools are going to get cold enough to freeze. They usually don't. But is it 45 degrees or is it 55 degrees? Or is it somewhere in between? Maybe it's 40. They don't know. You do. And that's a nice advantage for you. Okay. So what I want to say here is you need to make sure that you're keeping temperature into account, because now your perfect chemistry lowering down. Now, granted, it's not going to drop 50 degrees overnight, but your perfect chemistry is not going to be perfect all winter long, which leads into a winterization discussion. We've talked about that before. I'm not getting into that because that's a whole nother topic. But if you want that information, just go on our website. You can also go to the main menu. You can see articles here. We've got articles, procedures on how to winterize, plenty of other resources. All of that's in the app. It's on our website. But you need to take temperature into account in the springtime, in the summertime, all the time, year round. It's a bad habit to ignore it. So how do we make this right? If we were good here, now we need more. So we're going to need more calcium. Now we say in the Northeast, because we know your pools are going to freeze, you need a minimum of 400 calcium. Now you might get away with less during the summertime, and that's okay. But if you're winterizing, you probably actually want more like 500 to 600. It depends more on the type of cover that you have more than the type of surface. In other words, if you have no cover or you have a mesh cover, that actually matters more than if you have a vinyl liner pool or a plaster pool. The consequences are different, but the chemistry is actually more similar with an aerating cover that allows air to pass through and for water and rain, snow, and dilution to come in versus a solid cover. But again, another topic for another day. So how do we get that number green? Well, we realized very quickly that if we max out these ranges, according to the textbooks, we're still not green. Yeah, we're okay, we're safe, but we're not green. You're going to have to let that pH go up. And you're actually going to want to get it right to about 8, so you don't have to spike your alkalinity. You're going to want to be about 0.2. And that gives you a cushion. That gives you a safety net. Because when the spring comes and the water warms up, you can begin to work that pH down. And by the way, if you do have a mesh and solid cover over the wintertime, that calcium is not going to be as high as you left it, because you will have had dilution, and there's zero calcium in rain and snow. So that number is actually going to be lower. How much lower, I don't know. But again, I think we're getting into the weeds. Just make sure you do not ignore temperature. All right, so that's habit number 4. We're working our way down. Now let's get to habit number 3. Nathan, another star swipe because it's so advanced in video technology. The number 3, top 3 bad habit. Do not neglect your test kit. Now, you got to think of your test kit as one of the most valuable tools in your arsenal. And it needs to be treated as such. I tell people, and I know it's not realistic, but I tell people, think of it like it's your phone. You wouldn't leave your phone in the bed of your truck out in the hot sun all day. You're going to keep tabs on it. You're going to keep it in your pocket. You're going to keep it safe because you use it all the time. Well, you also use your test kit all the time. And what happens is, if you're using a reagent test kit or a digital or test strips or whatever you're using, hot temperatures can actually mess them up. I know I'm probably beating a dead horse. You've been taught this by all the test kit manufacturers, but you got to take care of these things. So moisture, if you get, let's say you're using test strips and your hand's wet, if you reach down in there, you can actually get moisture in the bottle and ruin all the test strips. Be careful, you lay it on the side. If you're using a reagent test kit, make sure that you're taking care of it. No expired reagents. Don't leave them out in direct sunlight. They don't want to get too hot. And I know it gets hot in the summertime, and I see people all over the place just leaving their test kit in the bed of their truck. Okay, I get it. Maybe you have a cart that it fits conveniently in and you take it in the backyard. But when you're driving around and you're not in someone's backyard, put it in your truck, like under a seat in the back or something. Keep it in the shade. Try to make sure that that test kit is as accurate as it can possibly be. Because if the test kit's skewed up, all right, because the reagent's spoiled or whatever else, okay, or you have a digital one and you haven't calibrated it in a while, don't neglect these things, because if they screw up, here we go again. We have faulty inputs that go into the calculator. And then, you couple that with not measuring chemicals, not knowing the volume of the pool, not taking temperature into account, blah, 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 blah. All of this fits together. And we go to distribution all over the country, pre-COVID, of course. And you'd be amazed. Like almost everybody leaves their test kit in the back of their truck. So don't feel guilty if you do. I mean, it's just what the industry does. I'm saying it might be okay on an overcast, cool day. It's not okay on a boiling hot summer day. Okay. And you also don't want your test kit to get so cold that it starts, under 40 degrees out or something. Those reagents will, and maybe potentially freeze, but they're not going to work very well. And another thing that goes along with this, I probably should have included it in the program, is when the water's cold, you need to actually warm up the sample of water before you actually test it. But this is especially true with reagent test kits because under, I think, 50 degrees, 55 degrees, the reagents don't work right. So what we recommend is take like a drinking water bottle, empty it out or drink it, and get a sample of water, get your elbow wet, and then cap that off, either label the bottle or just remember where you are, put it in your truck on the dashboard, let it warm up in the sun, or turn the heat on in your truck, or put it in your pocket, or do something to get the temperature of that water up. Now, of course, you still want the thermometer to tell you what the actual temperature is in the pool. That's going to be a much lower temperature than the sample you just pulled out. Such is the point. But now you know the temperature, put that in the calculator. But once you warm up that sample, you're still going to have the exact same chemistry, as long as you don't wait 2 days or something. Test it once it's warmed up. You're going to get more accurate readings. So that's the third of the bad habits. Treat your test kits with care. Don't neglect them. Don't leave them out in the sun. And don't let them get trashed. I mean, I've seen test tube vials just dirty and oily and all sorts of stuff. Take care of them. You need that tool. Okay, another side swipe because we're in our final two. Number 2, don't chase pH. Stop chasing it. I'm going to say it again. Don't chase pH. It's the wrong rabbit. We in this industry are so conditioned to think about pH as something that we can control. We have to be between 7.4 and 7.6 because, the book tells us so. And, you have to have 200 to 400 calcium and 80 to 120 alkalinity at all times. That's not realistic. Okay. Especially not in the wintertime. And it's also kind of conflicting with physics. And so why do they say these things? Why do we need a pH 7.4 to 7.6? Well, there's a couple arguments that have been made. One of which is chlorine efficiency, chlorine strength, right? The lower your pH, the stronger your chlorine because of the percentage of hypochlorous acid. And the higher your pH, the weaker your chlorine. Again, it's a smaller percentage of hypochlorous acid. So that's one of the arguments. The other argument is bather comfort. And I am going to speak on my own behalf, not Arenda's. I was a competitive swimmer, spent over 10 years competing. I've been in a lot of water for a lot of time. And I'm just going to go ahead and call bull on that one. I've been in water with a wide range of pHs, and I don't think that really has much to do with bather comfort unless the water is way out of whack, in which case there would be much bigger problems. Think about it this way. We drink bottled water that ranges from 5.5 pH, depending on the brand, up to 11 pH. We drink it. It all tastes pretty good. Why would it irritate our skin and eyes? I don't think it's pH. I really don't. I think it's more chloramine byproducts, but that's another conversation for another day. The bigger issue here is chlorine efficiency, right? And you want to make sure that your chlorine's working. You want to prevent algae. All that's great. But here's what they're not telling you. Okay, now some of the books do mention it, but sometimes that gets lost because over time you remember the real stickler, lower pH means stronger chlorine. That's true when there's no cyanuric acid involved. So that's true for an indoor pool. How many of your pools have 0 cyanuric acid? Now, those of you who lived in New York State, maybe some of yours don't have any cyanuric acid, and kudos to you if that's the case. It's harder to manage in the summer, these outdoor pools. But yeah, in your case, pH needs to be maintained because you have to have that chlorine efficiency. But with cyanuric acid, all that goes out the window. And yet we still chase pH because we're told that it has to be 7.4 to 7.6. But the truth is, and I'm going to show you a chart in a second, the truth is pH is actually a reactionary chemistry. It reacts to what you do. It's an equilibrium. And as you know, it moves very quickly. So you could try to set the pH and it could change within a few minutes after you leave or while you're still there. pH is controlled by the amount of carbon dioxide in the water. And we're going to explain that in just a second. But let's go to a chart here. Okay, this is the chart that we're all used to seeing. The red line is hypochlorous acid. That's the badass chlorine that kills, oxidizes, all that stuff. And the green line is the weak, hypochlorite ion, OCl negative, which is over 100 times slower and weaker at killing and oxidizing than hypochlorous acid. So as I hope you can see my mouse, at 7.0 pH, about 75% of this chlorine in the water is going to be the badass hypochlorous acid. Awesome. Only 25% is the weak. And then around 7.4 to 7.5, somewhere in there, it breaks even, 50% each. So 50-50, right? So the book tells us we need to be right in the middle here. 7.4 to 7.6 is the ideal. Now you could be between 7.2 and 7.8 is acceptable, again, depending on the book. But they say 7.4 to 7.6 is ideal. Now, does 50-50 sound ideal, or does 75-25 sound better? Now, if you're just trying to chlorinate, I would think 7.0 sounds much better. But there's more to the story, because with cyanuric acid, the chart changes dramatically. Find the red line now. Oh yeah, it's way down here. That's the same hypochlorous acid. So when we think of chlorine strength and efficiency, we're thinking about the percentage of chlorine in the water that is hypochlorous acid. Well, do you even see a difference? I mean, I'm going to zoom in on it. Do you see a difference between 7.0 and 8.0? I mean, it's a slight change, but it's low either way, right? Pretty low. OCl negative, as the pH, the hypochlorite ion, as the pH gets over 8, it starts to take off, but it's still less than 10% of your chlorine. It's not like it's this significant thing. And how often does your pH get up that high anyway? But what we really got to pay attention to here is this blue line. And that is chlorine that is bound to cyanuric acid, also known as isocyanurates. That is the vast majority of the chlorine that's in there. And by the way, guys, this is 30 parts per million cyanuric acid. So those of you that have been using trichlor, there is a chlorine shortage coming on, which might help you force yourself out of that bad habit. But you don't need that much cyanuric acid. Just 30 parts per million CYA at normal operating pHs has like over 95% of your sunlight protection. Boom. How about that? You don't need a lot. Overstabilization is a huge problem in our industry. And, I couldn't fit it in the top 6 list of bad habits, but it definitely could be number 7. So why are we trying to keep the pH so precise at 7.4 to 7.6? What does it matter in chlorine strength if you have cyanuric acid? Do you see much of a difference? I don't. In reality, you could have an 8.0 pH and have a comparable chlorine strength and efficiency. Now, I'm not saying you need an 8.0 pH, okay? But I'm saying you could have one, okay? And then you get into the physics, because I mentioned a moment ago that the pH of your water is controlled by the amount of carbon dioxide dissolved in water. So if you dissolve carbon dioxide, like a CO2 injector, pretty common on commercial pools, you add CO2, the pH goes down. But the alkalinity doesn't. The reason for that is, where does CO2 come from if you just add acid, right? You throw HCl, muriatic acid, hydrochloric acid. There's no CO2 in that. If you take HCl and add it to the pool, where does the CO2 come from to lower the pH? You have to add CO2 to lower the pH, because if CO2 leaves the water, your pH goes up. That's what aeration is. That's why in an algae green pool, your pH could be sky high. I measured one with a digital probe. It was 10.4. And that's because algae consumes CO2. It takes it out of solution. pH goes up. Aeration, spas, water jets, features, vanishing edges. The pH goes up. Aeration and time will release carbon dioxide from the water into the atmosphere because it's trying to equalize with the air above it. Now, again, I'm only scratching the surface here. This is a much deeper thing, but if you can understand the relationship with CO2 and pH, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to manage these pools and make them more predictable. What I'm saying in this bad habit is, don't chase pH. Stop chasing it. Instead, try to contain it. If you put acid in a pool, it has to burn through alkalinity to lower the pH, because alkalinity has carbon dioxide in it, HCO3. Okay. I say burn, it doesn't technically burn, but it sounds good. You're going to reduce your alkalinity. You're going to burn through it and take that to reduce the pH. That's why when you add acid, the alkalinity and the pH go down. But if you just inject CO2, you shortcut that process. You ignore the alkalinity, you just add more CO2 and it just directly lowers the pH. That's why your alkalinity doesn't go down. So when you're trying to control things, there is a relationship between alkalinity and pH, but it's more like on Facebook, it's complicated. Remember how they used to have the relationship status? Oh, it's complicated with such and such. Well, it's complicated. pH is going to rebound because it's always trying to find equilibrium. Okay. Given whatever circumstances it is, whether it's LSI equilibrium, but the real equilibrium the pH is trying to do is dictated by a law of physics called Henry's law, where it's trying to say the amount of CO2 in the water is trying to equalize with the amount of CO2 in the air by pressure. Not to get too far in the weeds, but your pH is going to rise to about 8.2. Read our articles. I'll explain all of it. It depends on your alkalinity, blah, 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 but it's going to rise. You're not doing anything wrong. It's supposed to rise. It's supposed to rise. And by the way, the closer it gets to 8.2 something, depending on your alkalinity, the slower the pH naturally rises, the slower CO2 leaves. So all week while you're gone, that pH is rising. It's supposed to. Now, if your pool was driven by trichlor as a primary chlorine, trichlor is an acidic chlorine, so it kind of suppresses that and you don't really notice it as much. But it's still trying to happen. Yeah, now, you definitely notice it on salt pools. You definitely notice it on liquid chlorine pools. Okay, that pH goes up and you get back and you're like, my pH, it's over 8. It's trying to get to 8.2. 8.2 something. Could be 8.1, could be 8.3. Again, depends on your alkalinity, but it's trying to get to the pH ceiling. That's where it's trying to go. You're not doing anything wrong. So if we know that you have a ceiling here based on Henry's law of physics that the pH is trying to get to, your objective as an operator is to contain that pH. You're trying to find where's the floor, and that floor is based on the LSI. Use the calculator. Set your parameters so that you can lower your pH down to usually 7.5 or 7.6. Again, it depends on your pool, but it could be 7.7. If you got cyanuric acid, you don't have to go to 7.4 anymore. Lower down to as low as you can go without turning that number red. Okay. And in some cases, you don't want it to go yellow, but in a salt pool, you would, liquid chlorine pool, you would, because the pH is naturally going to rise. You're going to be right back in the green on the Orenda app. Okay. So let's do an exercise real quick on exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to share my screen once again. Naturally, when you get there, it's going to raise itself up to about 8.2. Now, normally that would scale. Okay. But again, the LSI cannot oversaturate itself. It's not going to be 8.2 every single week, especially if you do this right. So at 82 degrees, you have kind of a high pH, but let's make this realistic. Let's make this a salt pool. All right. And let's put in a responsible amount of cyanuric acid, which is, under 50. Let's say you got 40. Okay. And 82 degrees. Yeah, you're barely scale forming if it gets to 8.2. Okay, I think that's about fair. Now, that's at 260 calcium. What you want to do is you want to find parameters that allow you to correct down to about 7.6. See, 7.5 is too low, but 7.6 is okay. And that's your correction for the week. Let's say you have a 32.5 thousand gallon pool. You're going to make this correction. And it says you need only 54.63 ounces of muriatic acid. Now that correction, you're saying, wow, I'm going from purple to yellow. Nothing about that is green. You're right. Except that when you leave, the pH is going to naturally start going up because of physics. And pretty soon, you're back in the green, baby. And it's slow. We're talking much, much slower. You're going to have several days where you're 7.9 to 8.0. And if you do it right, by the time you get back, you're going to be about 8.0, not 8.2. Now, again, we have tons of information on this. I don't mean to bog you down into the weeds, even though I just realized I just spent 15 minutes digging you through the weeds. Sorry. Hope it helps. So don't chase pH, contain it. Ceiling up here, floor of LSI, figure it out. The pH will naturally rise while you're gone. Who cares? You still have chlorine strength. It is a much more cost-effective way to manage these pools. It makes the chemistry predictable. And when chemistry is predictable, it's a lot more controllable. All right. Number 1. Nathan, the final side swipe. Make it mighty. 2 side swipes.
Stop it. Get some help.
Acid, muriatic acid specifically, is the most abused chemical in the pool industry, bar none. It's a huge problem. Not only do we add too much of it because we don't measure, or we don't dose, or we don't know the volume of the pool, right? We use it too much for everything. We use it too early on startups. People do like an acid bath. Oh, it doesn't look right. So I'm going to put in 1 gallon per 5,000 gallons of water, and I'm going to give it a hot start. You realize what that's doing to the concrete in the long term? You know, even if you just waited 30 days before you did that on a startup, you would at least allow the cement to cure to a degree that you can clean the surface with a lot less acid 30 days later. But nobody wants to wait that time. So instead, we'll just nuke it. Well, 2 years later, you're going to see the same marks that come back because that's how cement chemistry works. But, you know, who am I to say? Acid is so abused because it's used to cover up the problems of the past. And what I'm trying to say here is, of all the chemicals that you use, acid is the most important one to handle with care. That means measuring it right, dosing it right, and pouring it right. If you pour acid straight into a pool, it's going to sink right to the bottom. And we got a cool video about this. I don't have it in front of me. Unfortunately, I would show it to you. But thanks to the magic of production, we can add that video right now. And in this video, you can clearly see a jar of acid with food dye in it, straight acid being dropped in. Wow. And it goes right to the bottom because acid is 18% denser than water. I know 18% doesn't sound like it's a huge deal, but like, look at it. That's what 18% looks like. Now, if you dilute the acid, check this out. It's the same amount of acid going in, but it's diluted with water. It doesn't go to the bottom nearly as fast. So every time you add acid, you need to dilute it in water at minimum 5-1. The ideal is 10-1, and 10-1 would be let's see here, 5 gallons. So if you did 1 gallon in a 5 gallon, that'd be a 5-1. Of course, it would overflow the bucket. Let's say the half gallon or less in a 5 gallon bucket of water is appropriate. So if you're doing a quart of acid, put it in a 5 gallon bucket of pool water, dilute it, count to 10, pour it around the perimeter. That's the proper way to pour acid. There are no exceptions to this. People think that if you column pour and you just pour in one straight spot, that's going to lower alkalinity more than pH. That's a deception. That's not true. No matter how you add acid, you're still going to wipe out the exact same amount of alkalinity. The only reason people thought that was true is because you see those numbers change faster. What's really happening is you're putting acid in and it's sinking to the bottom. It's etching the bottom of the pool. And when that happens, well, calcium hydroxide comes out, 12.6 pH, neutralizes a lot of the acid, so you don't see the pH dropping as fast. But the reason for that is it's happening at the expense of your cement in your surface. And that's when you start seeing spots on the bottom. So again, I'm going to share my screen so you can see a few things. You like that jar analogy? This is where we got the idea from. This came from On Balance. This is a jar of, I'm sorry, not a jar. This is a bunch of acid being poured into a pool with food coloring in it. What do you think the pH by the main drain is? Is it even 1 pH? I don't even know. Acid just plunges straight to the bottom and it stays there. Oh, by the way, what does the main drain do? Oh, it pulls water in through the system. You got a salt cell? Yeah, well, hey, you're probably not going to have flakes in that pool, but you could also deteriorate the salt cell. You got a heat exchanger? Does it have a copper lining? These are the reasons these problems happen. We abuse acid. That's chugging acid right through your equipment. Is that fair to the homeowner? No, it's not. Always dilute. Always, always dilute. Look at that. Does that line at the bottom of the pool look familiar to any of you? Let's get a little bit bigger here. Isn't it suspicious that that's about an arm's length around the perimeter of this pool? This is acid abuse. Acid went straight to the bottom and etched. It's because it sank straight to the bottom. So you got to make sure you dilute. So back to acid abuse. Dose it right. So the first several habits had to do with knowing the temperature so that you actually can make an informed dosing decision. Knowing the pool volume so that the calculator will be accurate. Okay. And writing it down so you never forget it. And then actually measuring what the calculator tells you to do. Be specific. You're professionals, right? Professional cooks, even though they've done it so many times, they still use measuring cups. They just do. It's how you make sure a recipe is consistent throughout time. A lot of times our habits evolve because of convenience or shortcuts, and that's not fair to the homeowner. If you want to be profitable and you want to be good at your job and the best that you can be, and I hope you do, take these little tidbits of advice. They don't cost you anything. They don't really add much time to it either. Maybe a one-time thing for calculating the pool volume. I got that. But it's really going to make you better at your job. It's going to make you more profitable. And that's our goal. So a quick recap. You got to measure chemicals. Okay. If you don't have measuring cups, get them. One for dry, one for liquid. You got to know the volume of your pool. You got to measure it. You got to ask the pool builder, figure it out, write it down, put it in the equipment set so it doesn't go away. Then you got to not ignore water temperature. Think about the LSI. Remember that water temperature fundamentally changes everything. Winter chemistry is going to be different. You're going to want a higher pH in the winter. You're going to want a lot more calcium because the temperature is going to drop down. The water is going to be hungry for calcium. Whether you have a vinyl liner, fiberglass, I don't care. Your water's going to get pissed off if it gets too cold. You got to feed the water what it needs and predict the winter and then ease yourself out. Again, contact us if you have questions. Take care of your test kits. I'm not saying you have to buy a nicer test kit. Just take care of the one you have. Don't leave it out in the sun. Don't let the reagents expire. Treat it well. It's a very important tool in your arsenal. Okay. Stop chasing pH. Instead of chasing it and trying to control it, contain it. Okay. Make sure that you're using your LSI as your floor and Henry's law of roughly 8.2. Again, read the article. It'll tell you more. Contain it. Let that pH rise naturally, especially if you have CYA. Let it rise naturally. Don't panic. Make adjustments just to reset that. It'll save you a ton. Okay. And of course, the number one habit is abusing acid. We're using way too much of it. A lot of people are using twice as much as they need, which means they're spending more money on bicarb. So make sure that you are dosing, measuring, not just pool volume, etc. I could beat all these dead horses. I hope this has been valuable for you. I really do. These are 6 bad habits that can be changed. They cost you pretty much nothing to change, right? But they can mean a lot of profitability for you and your company. And you just don't think about it when it comes to one pool at a time because it's just a few ounces of acid. How many pools do you service a week? How many ounces are you throwing away? How many pounds of bicarb are you having to buy extra to replace the extra alkalinity you took out because of those extra few ounces of acid? How many pools do you not know the true volume of? How many pools are you overdosing everything because you don't know the volume of it? How many times have you made bad chemistry decisions because you didn't know the temperature and weren't paying attention to the LSI? Ask yourself these questions. I'm not indicting anybody. You don't have to listen to us. Just ask yourself personally. This is a problem all over the country. If you are, one of the people that is violating these habits, or I should say doing these bad habits, you're not alone. Pretty much everybody in the country is doing this. So it's just like ingrained in the industry. We're not criticizing you. We're just pointing out that there's a much better way to do these things. So there's an article that I was referencing when I was sharing my screen. You can find that on our blog. It's also in the app. If you forget any of these things, feel free to look right at it. We have hyperlinks out to other articles that go in more depth on each one of these habits. Hopefully this helps. If you have any questions, contact us. You can do it right through the app. It's really easy. You can contact us on Facebook. You can email me, Eric, ERIC, @orendatech.com. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you to NESPA for having us teach. I hope you guys have had a lot of value in this, and I wish you all the best in this new year. Thank you all so much. Take care.